This is the Code, Deploy, Go Live podcast, episode 4, with Julie Turner and Andrew Connell. This episode is available as a video on YouTube channel, linked in the show notes. Today, Andrew and I are going to talk about strategies for creating reusable code libraries, recorded live, April 28th, 2025. Hey, buddy!
How are you
Back
doing?
at it.
Back at it again.
Good.
How are you today?
Yeah, I'm very good. I say I'm very good, but my son, even with an OtterBox protecting his iPad, has managed to bend and minorly crack the iPad screen. So that just happened, and I just got the call that it'll be $250 to fix it or $350 to replace it. So guess who's not getting another iPad?
Oh, that hurts.
I'm like over it.
Yeah.
Yep. So I had that distressing news. How about yourself? How are things?
Things are good. We just spent the weekend at Parents Weekend, where my son goes to college, and it's interesting because like Parents Weekend kind of sometimes also like homecoming at a lot of places, at least a lot of colleges in the United States. And for schools that are mostly like that have like a big sports contingent, like where I went to school, I had like 46,000 undergrads. It was always around like a football game. And so there was always stuff to do. But my son is a fashion design major in an art school. So instead of doing it in the fall, they do it in the spring. And because he's in Savannah, they have this huge park in the middle of Savannah, Forsyth Park. And they end up making, it's all around the Sidewalk Chalk Festival, which
Fun.
it is cool. It's pretty cool. It's a little tight because you know, part of the sidewalk is kind of covered with sidewalk chalk before they do the whole like review and stuff. But it is really cool. Like there's some really cool ones that are done. A lot of like, you know, pop culture, a lot of stuff that's like, I mean, it's college, so it's a lot of political stuff. It's a lot of like funky stuff. But it's like, there was one, they had the alumni were there and they're like, yeah, we've been doing this for 40 years. And you look at what they've done and it's like, oh my God, have you been like focusing on the same one like every year? Like, no, we do something different each time. And there's like 5 of them. Like, it's huge. It's like, most of them take like 1 square, maybe 2 squares. This one is like it's like a cube of like a 4x4. It's huge. So it's really cool. So it's fun. And it's like, what else did you do? Like, no, didn't really party. We got to see where my son has lunch when he's working, or dinner, like when he's working at midnight in the buildings, and he showed us his work and stuff. So it was good. It was good to see him. It was good. Like, very chill weekend. So it was nice.
Nice. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Sounds like a fun time.
It was a good day.
Well, cool. Well, should we dive in then? Get going?
We should.
You have a bunch of news items for our news segment. So why don't you go ahead and share with the class all the things that you have learned. Mr. Connell, go ahead.
I can do that. I wish I could tell you that there was a lot that I learned. I've got 3 news items for us today. And of course, and again, just to remind everybody, this is our 3rd episode and we're recording a bunch of stuff ahead of time because we want to make sure that we a couple episodes ahead of time before we publish, so that you don't like, hey, look, new podcast, like 1 episode, like great, it was introduction. Where's the rest? So we want to we want to have a few episodes going. And of course, it's kind of hard to like pick stuff that's news, even though we know we're not going to share it with you for a couple of weeks. So it's like a little tough, but you get a little bit of the taste of flavor, get a little bit of our opinions in it, like the SharePoint Framework. They dropped a new release on the SharePoint Framework version 1.21 on, I believe it was April 23rd, same day as they made their announcement about the dev tenants, which we're not going to talk about again. We did that in episode 2. There's not a lot here.
I guess we're reading each other's minds.
Yeah, I mean, everyone's like going, I can't wait to see you do the unboxing of like another one of your unboxing series of like what's in the SharePoint Framework 1.21. And I'm like, yeah, well, I opened the box and I'm still kind of looking for what is there. So that wasn't too surprising. The big thing, it's a little weird to some of the stuff that they put in these releases, because it doesn't really like they talk about the big changes. And so like one of the changes they talk about is the introduction of flexible layout configurations for web parts. except you don't even have to upgrade to get this because it has nothing to do. I mean, it has something to do with SharePoint Framework, but all you have to do is put something extra in the manifest for the component.
Right.
And those were defined in the schema files, and those aren't versions. So you could be doing that in 1.20, and even if you're at 1.16, you can still be doing it. So I'm not sure that's new. I mean, it's new, but it's not SharePoint Framework new.
Yeah.
There's also an ability to have some personalization with Viva Connections cards, with Viva Connections dashboards at the card level. But again, SPFX is
not.
This isn't.
Yeah. This feels more like a news item that we would talk about on Ask and Praxis, and for more end users or admins or business people or, whatever. It doesn't feel like something that should be in the SPFX news.
It really,
whatever.
It really doesn't. I mean, they talk about how, like, even the part at the end of it, they always say, like, here's how to install the SharePoint Framework latest version and what is the SharePoint Framework. I'm like, those two sections are bigger than the rest of the stuff that they have to share with it. So
yeah,
the big thing though for developers that is worth talking about is they bumped up the versions of Node.js and TypeScript. So finally, we are not on a very old version of TypeScript. We're on TypeScript. We go from, I think it's 4.7.4 is what we were on 1.20. And now we're up to, I think, 5.3, which is a nice bump, especially for those of us who do like automated testing and have been stuck like using really old versions of Jest and TS Jest and stuff to make stuff work. So thankfully that got bumped up. And the other one that's a big deal for a lot of companies is they bumped up the version of Node to support Node version 22, because they were only supporting up to Node 18 with a previous version, but that is no longer, or at least any day now, is going to be like out of support. And then they just said, well, screw it, we're going to skip 20 and just go straight to 22. So I'm like, I mean, okay, but so it's a bit of a maintenance kind of stuff. So unless you're like really doing some like testing and stuff, I don't really think you're going to see much of a benefit from upgrading.
I think it's more a use thing. I mean, I'm happy about it because I write a lot of Azure functions too. I mean, we talked about this before. I sort of do dual work. I used to write all my Azure functions in C# and now I do Node for both. And tell me how you really feel without saying anything.
I knew I'd get you.
The only problem then, of course, is I'm writing all my Azure functions and I need a more up-to-date version of Node. So I'm constantly using MVM to switch back and forth. I mean, you can make it work, but you get a whole bunch of warnings and it's just not something you want to do. So, I forgot I installed while I was on the wrong version of Node, and then you got to remove everything and reinstall again. Because I do a lot of context switching. I'm constantly like, oh, I'm doing the function. Oh, I'm doing SharePoint Framework. Oh, I'm doing this. I'm doing that. So I'm constantly context switching. So to NVM back and forth is kind of a pain in the butt. And then, to remember. So, I mean, from that perspective, I'm happy because it means I can be on one level playing field. And of course, TypeScript 5, happy about that too, obviously. So
yeah, I get it. I mean, it's like, actually, you mentioned NVM, one for Windows, right? NVM for Windows. Is your own
yes. One? Yeah. Yeah.
Have you played with FNM, the fast manager?
No.
So I'm switching over to it. So I've been using the original NVM, the Node version manager. So a little bit of a tangent here, everybody. I've been using the original NVM, which was done for Mac OS. And then this guy did a Windows port of it, which wasn't really a port. He just rewrote it using that would run on Windows. And basically just use the Mac version as like his spec for what he was going to do. And I mean, it's worked great. However, that one is like code locked or frozen. It's not, they're not working on it anymore. They're working on something else called runtime. But what's interesting though, is that somebody created one called the Fast Node Manager. So FNM. This one is nice for a couple of reasons. Number one, it's written in Rust, which means it's incredibly fast and it's secure.
Yeah.
But it's also cross-platform. So I now can use FNM on my Mac machine and on my Mac laptop, and you can use the same one, and we have the commands that do the exact same thing. So I've been using it for a little bit. I saw it. I watched a friend of mine, a friend of ours actually, Stefan Bauer, switch over to it. He says he had no problems with it. I have any problems with it. I'm just now like way overdue on like telling my customers, like, I know I've written all these articles about it and told you to use this. You should use this instead. And it's it's a great way. It's a great solution, especially cross-platform stuff. And you can, I don't want to scare anybody, but like you can totally get yourself wrapped around the axle. But if you try to like do too much manipulation with it, but you just use it the way it's supposed to be used, you're all good. I have a student that's gotten it. He's tried to like fine tune stuff with scripts and stuff. And I'm like, dude, no, rip everything out, start from over. So
yeah. Anyway. Cool. I didn't know about that. Well, I will now check it out for sure. Thanks. Thanks to the tip.
Just threw my pen out of the way. There we go. All right. So now the other thing that we'll have, what was that? David Letterman would do that, just like throw it.
Yes, he would. He would absolutely do that. And I don't know what you're going to write with that pen, but okay.
Yeah. Well, and I'm definitely not cleaning of David Letterman. So.
Okay.
Anyway. The next thing I got for us to talk about is a big update from Microsoft. They like to call this their big wave. So this is the Spring Wave 2 release for Microsoft 365 Copilot. So this big update, they have a bunch of stuff to share, which is kind of like it's a little bit of, hey, remember that stuff we told you about? Yeah, we're actually delivering it now. So it's kind of a bit of an update. The big highlights are an AI-powered search. This is more like to help enterprises. They say, find what you need instantly with rich context-aware answers from across your organization, and it connects to first and third-party apps like ServiceNow, Google Drive, Slack, Confluence, Jira, and more. Found it kind of funny. Didn't say it was looking inside of Teams, so that was interesting. But I also honestly, when they kind of pitched this, I look at it and go, isn't this what Copilot was already doing? So they don't do a good job in the article really explaining what's new here. Maybe it's taking a little bit of the lead from the SharePoint Framework news that we had. They do have 2 new agents, a researcher and an analyst, that are available. They use the OpenAI reasoning models, which if you've ever used one of those, it's like kind of crazy watching it go back and forth. It's like 2 old people trying to figure something out. But I watched that with ChatGPT. I was asking, take 2 different P&L statements in QuickBooks and merge them into a single one. And it's like, nope, that didn't work. Let me try this. Oh, I found it. It's because a hyphen thing that's wrong here. Let me go change that. Okay, let me string replace that. Still running into problems here. Let me try this. It's like, can you just let me know when you're done? You don't need to prove to me you're working, but.
Funny.
Also announced a new agent store to make it easy for us to find, pin, and use a different collection of different agents. And then, of course, they talk about a bunch of different agents that are out there. We can build our own agents. We can publish them there. There's a whole create capability where it's much more baked in with OpenAI's GPT-4o image generation. Interesting. They're not kind of doing more integration with Microsoft Designer, but okay. There's a Copilot notebook, allows you to pull together a wide range of content from notes, documents, websites, meeting recordings, and more. And then it grounds Copilot on your notebook. So you essentially kind of, it feels more like a power, the video I watched, it feels more like a power user way of building an agent where you pull together the knowledge, get rid of the stuff you don't want, and then say, when I ask you questions, only mess with this stuff.
I like that. I like that as an idea. I mean, obviously I haven't touched it yet, but I fundamentally like the idea of that. So we'll see. And
let's see what else they do here. There's some other stuff too they talk about with Copilot Studio. There's a whole analytics piece, but they talked about that at Ignite last year as well. There's agent management and the admin center that's now generally available. And that's kind of it. Then they make a big deal about this thing called the Work Trend Index, which is a way to get the latest research and insights and emergence of the frontier firm, which, okay.
At least I'm not alone in going, what the heck is that?
It feels very marketing-y, so very keynote-y.
Okay.
But I don't know. We're getting close to build, so we're gonna have to be a little keynote-y.
Of course. Yes, very much so.
The last thing I got for you is, we'll go through this one a little bit quicker, is the introduction of the Microsoft Graph API usage report. This is a way for us to get access using an API to find out how much are we using Microsoft Graph, and what's our usage look like. We've heard over the years, I've heard them talk about, publicly about hinting about metered APIs and stuff like that a little bit here and there. And I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if this is kind of like a precursor to that. So people are going, if you're going to charge me for it, I need to know how much I'm using.
Yeah.
So, and they talk about here their initial service areas they're focusing on: Microsoft Exchange, Teams for calling, messaging, and presence. And they say they may add more service areas over time. That kind of tells me that if you are using Microsoft Exchange, Teams calling, presence, and messaging, then if there are going to be any kind of metered things or quotas or anything like that that they're going to start to kind of push out, then it's kind of like, well, if you're giving me a way to look at this stuff first, it's kind of where I think it might go first, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't really know where it went, but several years ago, I was doing some work on Teams messaging stuff to pull in whether there was messages in a particular team to sort of check activity of a team, like to see if a team was active. And at that time, you had to get access to that API, you had to send in and get a authorization for your tenant to use that API. And that was supposed to be the precursor for charging. I have full disclosure, no idea what ever happened to that. But assuming, to your point, I think charging for APIs is definitely either it's already here for some small ones and I just don't know about it, or it's coming down the pike, I think.
It at least is going to be probably a way to be a little bit more transparent about the quotas or the throttling or something like that that's going to be going on. So whether it's needed, whether it's not, I mean, we'll see. So
the other aspect of this is sort of just on a light perspective, a security thing. Like if you don't believe that you have any apps that are using those APIs and you run this report and all of a sudden you're seeing tons of things hitting something, that can tell you something. So from that perspective, it could also be viewed as sort of like a security and audit type report.
It definitely could be. And I gotta tell you, I've always been surprised that we have not had something like this in 365 for Graph before. Like every company, every service that I use for my business, I always have some sort of a limit. Like I use Zapier and it's like, here's how many calls you've made and here's your chart on what your usage is and what each one of your Zaps are using. Like, cool. Okay. I just switched over to using Circle for our implementation for our community for watching courses and stuff. And it's like, you've used this many thousands of calls on your allocation for the entire month. Here's where they're being called from. Here's how you're using it, blah, blah. And it's like, that just, every service does that. I've never understood why Graph has just been like, we'll just tell you when you're getting too chatty. It's like, that's like mom telling me like going, you're too loud upstairs. Like, I didn't know, like, where was I supposed to start being quiet? So whatever. I don't know.
God, please let's not go there.
Yeah. Any gamers in the house?
Okay.
So that's all the news I got today.
Awesome. Well, that's some good news. Well, it's news anyway, not necessarily good or bad or the other. All right. Well, since we got through the news, let's dive into what we're really here to talk about, which is reusable code. So just a introductory sort of perspective. This is something that I've been doing for quite a long time, probably a good 6-ish years, I would say, which is to think about when I'm building things for the SharePoint framework or whatever I'm trying to build for, how some of that code might be reusable, right? And so I've, over the years, developed a few strategies for that. And so I thought we could sort of spend the time and sort of go through like all the things that I've thought about, and we can see how we think about it. So essentially, when we're talking about reusable code, we are talking about not only services, so service type code, like a library that does a particular function for you. It could also be user experience components, like I help co-author Fluent UI design library called H2O. Those are all UX components. That's a package. That's a library that you can use. And everybody's actually pretty familiar with this. If they do SharePoint Framework development or Node.js development or C# development. It's just a different package managers. You're going to go and say, hey, am taking a dependency on a set of packages that are helpers to my code. You don't have to take any dependencies on anything. You can roll your own of everything, but that's an awful lot of work and doesn't often make sense. So if we have those reusable code libraries out there as third-party solutions that we can use, there is no reason why we can't roll our own when we have a bit of code that is something that we could reuse across multiple projects, and then we can encapsulate those ideas. So in that vein, we have a couple of different ways where we can do that. One way is sort of a light version, which is to use code splitting. So with frameworks and bundlers, which we use when we build solutions, both of those tools often have ways that we can segregate bits of our code out into other sort of sub-module packages. A lot of times when we're talking about code splitting, we're doing that because we're trying to essentially speed up our browser, right? We want to be able to download things in chunked way so that we can get up and running first bits up fast, and then the things that we can load later. So we have ways of doing that. SharePoint Framework has React, so we have the web chunk name thing that we can do because we use React and Webpack, and we can segregate out a section of code and make that happen later. So the other thing that SharePoint Framework has is libraries, right? And so that's like a special SharePoint Framework project type that allows people to take and set a code and build it as a library and load that library in and essentially reuse it across a bunch of projects. The problem is, although a pro is that it's very simple to use, the cons are many and plethora of. It's based on a technology called npm link, and it is probably one of the most finicky and painful things I've ever worked with. When I first tried it, and again, this was years and years ago, I was like, this is horrifying. You essentially have to npm link to your library, and then it puts a special library in your global packages, and then you can import it into your project. The problem is you can only have one registered at a time, and it can get like screwed up pretty easily, and then you have to delete the library and you have to do a whole bunch of things. It's just a complete pain in the bahooty.
Yeah. You said that there was the problem is, and I was like, there's one. No, there's not one. I hope you're going to keep going with that. So yeah, when you build like an npm package, you're going to do the same thing testing it. You're still using npm link. It's that the limitation on the SharePoint Framework libraries to me, like where you can't, like you said, only one version. I deploy it to production. I can only have one version deployed to production. Like if I deploy a second version, there's not another version out there. That's what's deployed to production. So it's a grip it and rip it. Like, let's hope everything is ready and we got to upgrade everything at one time. And you can't have things that are like separate and stuff. I've never understood. I've really disliked these SPF libraries. I mean, it's a problem that was already solved, and it's like they've decided that Microsoft tried to decide we're going to make a new wheel. It's like the wheels are good. We've had the wheels.
Yeah.
These things work. This problem was solved for everyone. We don't need a SharePoint Framework solution to a problem that has already been solved.
100% couldn't agree more. So, as you just noted, you can only have one at a time. And then further, because it's built on, it's a type of SharePoint Framework solution, that means you don't have any control over the build chain, like you don't have any control over the SharePoint Framework build chain. And there's just no good reason for it, like none. So, lots of cons in my mind. And npm link, quite frankly, is one of the bigger ones of those for me. So, the industry standard for all this, as you just sort of mentioned, is packages. So a package is essentially just a collection of code and resources bundled together that provides some functionality. And we use, as I said before, we use them all the time. So why aren't we just going to use them if we need to bundle together some specific experience for our code, right? Industry standard, right? B, supported by Azure DevOps, GitHub, NPM, and just a huge plethora of third-party tools. JFrog is one that comes to mind. Package managers that are enterprise grade, that are used by companies all over the world to do this kind of development. This is definitely the right way to go. There are, you mentioned that you can use NPM link, and certainly you can, because that's an NPM functionality, but there's many ways to link and test, and NPM is my absolute least favorite of all of those. So, whatever. Packages take a little bit more time to set up, right? So if the first time, let's say it that way. So, you have to figure out what your build chain is. If one of the things that you're doing with the SharePoint framework is relying on the fact that somebody put a build chain together and you don't particularly understand how it works, which is totally, it's what it is. It's not easy. It's not simple for sure. But if you're relying on that, then switching to go create your own build chain takes some research, takes some time. It can be frustrating to figure out how all of those things work together and make it work. And if you're, depending on how you're going to then use that library, if you're going to bundle it in, you're fine. If you want that library to sort of sit out there and be hosted in a CDN, then of course you need a delivery solution. So you have to think about that too. So it just depends how you're going to use the library as to whether you need that aspect of it or not. But that's another piece. So.
Yeah. I mean, it's still like, even with all the downsides or even the extra work, that's the one thing I see people say about, I don't want to use an NPM package because with the SharePoint Framework library, it already has the entire build chain already set up for me, so I'm already good to go. I'm like, yeah, but like what you're using isn't really all that, it's not all that good. But not only that, like there are other options that are very lightweight, are not hard to set up. And if you really wanted to, if you're used to using if you're a SharePoint Framework developer and you're already using Yeoman to go through and to build out projects, there are Yeoman generators for spinning up an NPM package project that you want to go with. It's very easy to do it. And don't try to mimic and do the exact same thing the SharePoint Framework team has done. That is way over-engineered as far as I'm concerned. But regardless, it still is not enough. It's not enough to sit there and to outweigh the disadvantages of what an SPFX library component does. NPM packages, plus if you create an NPM package, you can use it anywhere. You can use it in a SharePoint Framework project. You can use it on a server-side project. You can use anywhere you have it, you can use it anywhere.
Right. That's absolutely couldn't have said it better myself. And I think, there's a certain aspect, there's a certain aspect of this that is, I don't know. I have a really hard time with the idea of people being like, oh, that's too hard. I don't want to learn that. Like, I get my back up really quick on that. I know people we both know that will be like, it's too hard. I don't think it should be this hard. Microsoft should be making it easier. I'm like, no, just learn the base technology, or you don't want to do this job. You either like doing development and you want to learn how to do it and you're willing to that doesn't mean you always have the time to do it or whatever. And there's ways around and there's starting points and there's blogs and there's whatever, but learn it. I don't know. I have a real hard time with that. I
will never forget. When you say something in public and you're just like, I probably shouldn't have said that. You ever done that?
Oh my God. How many times have I?
Okay.
Yeah.
I was going to say
many times.
I will never forget being at a conference of 400 or 500 people in the room when I was doing a presentation a long time ago. And this guy's like, God, I'm just so sick of learning something new. I'm like, dude, you're in the wrong business, man. If you're tired of learning something new, you should go be a carpenter. And I'm not saying they don't learn anything new or they don't have new skills they pick up, but you can get by just fine with probably just about, I'm sorry to the carpenter contingent that's picked up on this podcast, but I'm pretty sure that you could that you could get by just fine with your core, base of what you understand, and be like, no, I don't, I'm just only going to do it this way. Never gonna, or cooking. I understand how to cook. I don't want to have to learn a new way to cook. I don't need to do this.
Absolutely.
Go outside and go complain at the clouds. So anyway, I'm back.
Yeah, no, again, that is the rant that I constantly have. And I try to be understanding and sympathetic, but at the same time, it's like, just go do something else if you don't like to learn. Okay, so we've talked about the package and what they're good for. And so then I want to segue into, okay, so now you have one, you've taken either your user experience or you've taken your service or whatever it is that could be its own set of functionality. And now you need to consume it. And sort of, as I was saying, there are a lot of different ways to consume and work with one of these libraries. And it just depends what your goals are, essentially. So the simplest to get started is if you work local and you don't publish your repos, right? So there's, to like sort of level set, we're talking about these package managers that we have out there. You know, ADO has one, GitHub has one, NPM has one, all these third-party tools.
Package registries.
Yeah, package registries, thank you. So we have all these package registries. Packaging isn't about the registry. Packaging is about how you build the container for the code. The registry is just a bonus because it allows you to get access to that package from another project. Like, it's a method of getting access. So you could just work local. You could have 3 or 4 or 5 sibling folders, each one with a project inside of it. And you could then take let's say SharePoint Framework, because that's what we're using as an example. We could take SharePoint Framework, and in our package.json, we could just use file relative paths to those other folders that are sibling folders and say, I want to use these packages. And essentially what that file relative path is pointing to the package.json in the other project. And they could all be put into different repositories for code maintenance, but you're just making a relative path to them. So it's pretty hard to maintain that. And the reuse is pretty fiddly, because if you delete that directory, you got to make sure you re-download it into the same place so that the paths are still the same. So it's a little fiddly if you're doing relative paths all over the place. But if you're one person and you're not going to share, you're just developing for yourself or whatever, it's not any big thing, there's probably nothing wrong with it. And you're not having to publish anywhere or whatever. You're just building your individual things. It's an easy way to get started, right? Mm-hmm. On seeing how all of these things fit together. The sort of second one that I can think of, and maybe you'll come up with some as we're going along, but the second one I can think of, which is my least favorite, I've done it a couple of times and I really dislike it, is monorepos. So monorepos is the idea that you have a root folder, and in that root folder is a package.json, and then you have subfolders for all the modules of code that you're going to do, but they're all living in one repository. They're pretty tricky to maintain, not as hard as the separate repositories, because it's all, the code is right there. But then at the same time, it kind of is, because if you make a change in one subfolder, you're pushing to everybody and everybody's got a pull, and the merging of that can get really ugly when you're talking about code, repositories. This is the hardest one to reuse too, right? Because if anything's in a mono repo, like if you have some other, you'd have to add another project to the mono repo or create a new mono repo, and then you cloning your code. I mean, it's just, it's ugly fast. It's pretty simple to get started again, but it just ugly.
It's just the name in itself has always been like, I've used it too. I don't have as much of a disdain for it, but there's just something about the name is just kind of one of those, like, I don't think I want to do this. I don't want to do a mono repo. Like, I'm not looking for this big thing. Like, it's not, dev is supposed to be more lightweight, and like modern dev is supposed to be more lightweight, like service oriented architecture type stuff, and more modular different services, and not like more modules, and not like I'm building a monolith. Like, oh look, I'll give you a mono repo. Like going, no. We're going the other way. I want to go the other way. And I know that's not. It is the name. So it's not like you're getting fooled. But there's a part of it that's just like, I don't think that's what I really want. I don't think so.
No, 100%. But in the previous world, right, we didn't have much options. We kind of had those options. So my sort of third option, and the one I'm using personally a lot now, I work a lot with Stefan Bauer, who we mentioned earlier, and this is absolutely the best way to work when you're working in teams, in my opinion. So what we do with this last one is we create what's called an NPM workspace. Now, that is related to the package manager NPM. Yarn and other ones have similar things. So I'm talking specifically about NPM workspaces because that's the one I use and that's the one I know. But there are the idea of workspaces in some of the other package managers. So I don't want to make it sound like you can only do this with NPM. I think they're incredibly easy to maintain. And I'll sort of go into why. Way easy to reuse. I'll go into why. But probably the hardest to get set up. So what is it? So a workspace is the idea that you have a project. Let's say it's going to be a SharePoint Framework project. And I'll use the example that is most relevant to what Stefan and I do. Stefan builds style guides for all of our projects. And we usually have a client and we'll have one style guide for that client where essentially it's a visual. It's using Pattern Labs, which is a third-party sort of platform for hosting design elements, right? So that you can visual design elements. And so Stefan has taken that and made it, we use that for H2O. So it's a way that he can design out all the elements and all the HTML and CSS and how that's going to look. And we can visually see them and we can put them together in different ways really quickly and easily and see what the UX is going to look like. It's a great way that we can prototype for clients because they can see what the UX is going to look like before we even hook up anything in it. So he'll build out these style guides. Well, the style guide then has all the CSS that I need to go do my work. It also has all the HTML that I need to go do my work. So that style guide is super powerful for me. He builds that all in a repository, all separately from me. Then I say, okay, well, now I need to build a SharePoint Framework solution to implement the styles that he's put together. And so I will go and create a project, a repository. And in that, I'm going to set up a package.json as a workspace. And essentially what that does is it says, this is a definition of the pieces inside of this project. So we'll have a we'll have a subfolder for the SharePoint Framework. We'll have a subfolder for the style guide. And in this case, the style guide is a submodule. And so if you've ever worked with submodule, if you work with Hugo, which I know you do, the themes for Hugo are submodules. So you install the theme and it goes into a particular subfolder. And it's essentially all the code for that. In this case, for me, it's the style guide, or for Hugo, the theme. And you can modify it if you want to. It's pointing to a repository that's up on the server, but it's a submodule. And so I can essentially relatively point to it inside of that project. But if I have another SharePoint Framework project, I can point to the same style guide as a submodule and use it in my project.
It kind of like when you're saying submodule, for those who are like, haven't heard of this before, it's basically it's like a child GitHub repo or child Git repo.
Yes.
So each module is its own repo, and then you have one main repo, but then that can be pointing to other smaller repos. So you can say, I want to give me everything for the parent. I don't want that Git pull to go through and to refresh everything for all the submodules. I want them to stay on the same version that they're on right now. Or I can individually go through and upgrade each one of those. So it's just like nested Git repos. I keep saying GitHub. I just mean Git.
I know exactly. Yes, I do that all the time by accident. So yeah, exactly. And so it gives you a ton of power to essentially work on all of these different pieces of the project. And so I could have modules that are like the style guide, but I could also have modules that do a bunch of external work that I just need to reference. And so they can also be submodules. It becomes super easy to manage what you're working on because you can really focus in on just the work I need and all the modules are there. Now, this sort of is around this idea that you're going to bundle in whatever it is in the submodule, or you're going to be working on the thing that's in the submodule, right? So services are a common sort of idea around this, where you're not going to publish this package, you're just going to use it as a repository. The other option is to package them and push them to a manager. right? So that's what we were talking about earlier.
Registry.
Registry.
Yeah.
So this idea that we could then say, so this is what like H2O, the library is. So we work on H2O, the library, and I'll take a dependency on that in my SharePoint Framework project, but it is published to npm.js. So that's the registry, and I point to the registry and I say, I want this N8D, H2O-React in my library. And this is how we point to all of the libraries. Now, all the code then is in your node modules folder instead of being in a submodule. That's a different thing. And then you can tell the bundler that you either, and this is something we can do with SharePoint Framework, we can go into some of the configuration settings of the SharePoint Framework and we say, I don't want, instead of taking dependency on this and bundle the code that I reference, that I import in, I want you to reference any reference to that library. I want you to point to an external place where I'm going to host that library.
Yeah.
And then it will dynamically bring it in. Now, this can be interesting because if you keep the interface the same, so if you have a standard interface, and so, like for SharePoint Framework, like if you want to inject a user experience into the SharePoint Framework, if you think about how that works when you're in your base TS file, you basically say this .dom element, right? And you bind whatever your root React component or whatever you want to, if you're doing hooks, whatever that is.
You want to just a component.
Yeah. Okay. Whatever the terminology is. When you bind the root component to the DOM element, that's all you're really doing. And then all your code lives elsewhere. So one of the things you could think about doing if you wanted to eject yourself out of the sort of SharePoint Framework build pipeline is that you could think about what that interface might be, right? So what is it that the SharePoint Framework has? The context usually is the primary one, and that DOM element, right? So you could essentially build an interface into your library that was a complete application with your own build pipeline doing essentially whatever you want. The one thing I would caution you to do is if you're going to do a React component, don't use a different version of React. That's just not a good plan. But you can essentially make an interface on your project that is the way that you can then point to an external source. You could bundle it in, but there'd be no point of that. You point to that external source and you basically just initialize it, passing in whatever pieces of the context you need and that DOM element, root DOM element, and then your app all comes from that library. So you could think about the fact that you could just version the library on the CDN anytime you wanted to upgrade it, and it would just pull that new version from the CDN. And so you could sort of manage your deployment outside of SharePoint entirely or Teams entirely, depending on how you want to think about it.
You totally can. I like the flexibility is nice. The other one that I've used when I've got a package that I don't really want to. I don't want to build like a big mono repo, or I don't want to build like a whole bunch of workspaces and stuff. It's more like I want to build a package, but I don't really. It's only one that I'm really going to use, and so I don't really need to worry about putting it up in a registry, because those two things, it doesn't matter where you're actually going to put it. Like it doesn't matter where it lives in the registry or where you're going to be pulling it from in your project. You want to be able to make it, I guess, performant is being able to make sure you split that stuff out and put it the final build output in like a CDN. One of the options I like doing is don't even put it in a registry, because you can install a npm package into a node-based project with just straight from a GitHub repo. And so the protocol you put in, like install straight from this repo, you point to the repo, it installs it. And one of the things that's kind of nice about that too is that also allows you to do private packages. So I have like npm packages I use in my projects that are only ones that I use. And even if someone saw them in a package.json file when I was working at a conference or something, they go to install and it's like, nope, sorry, you can't do that. That's in the Boykanos org, and that package is not public. But it's not just in the npm registry. I'm actually pulling it straight from my private org and my private repository inside GitHub. So
yeah, that's how we do the npm workspaces. So the style guide is in this case, Azure DevOps. it's a different repository, and we're just pointing at that GitHub repository in the package.json that is defining the workspace. So that's absolutely an easy way to do it. I worked in a big enterprise development team, and they use JFrog, and so they wanted you to register your packages into that package manager. Like, that's how they wanted it done. So, but I agree with you. Like, there's no real need to do that if you're going to make private registrations, for lack of a better way to say it. You just point right at the GitHub repo, and that's the easiest way to do it. Totally agree with that.
It's nice having those options. I love the one option that you mentioned too, about like you could build out your entire React component, like, or your entire React app that you're going to build that as its own NPM package. And then you can leverage that inside of, like, say, a SharePoint Framework project or Microsoft Teams project, Microsoft Teams app. So that would be my preference. I mean, I didn't even think about even doing this as an option. I remember you told me this a year or so ago. It's like, this is what I do. And I'm like, that makes so much sense. And it's now, so you're not building like a SharePoint Framework web part that you want to run inside of Teams, which they always break at some point. They fix themselves and they break again, and you can't ever get, like, it's brittle. And then on the team side, you build this Teams app and you want to go run it in SharePoint, but it's going to be running in an iframe, and it's like, this isn't what I want.
Yeah.
This is like such a great option, because it's like, hey, the Teams app that you build, the SharePoint Framework app that you build, I do all of my SharePoint Framework stuff like this, where the only thing I'm doing with the SharePoint Framework with any kind of a component, like a web part or a application customizer, if there's anything that's got UX associated with it, custom forms for lists and libraries, like field customizers and command sets don't really make sense in this case, and rarely do like app customizers, but web parts and the form customizers, like I never go through and do like anything in the web part itself or in the form customizer. It is just a shim for SharePoint to be able to talk to my React app, and my React app to talk back to SharePoint when it needs to save settings. Everything is going to be its own NPM package. It's like, you know what? The only thing that sucks about it is I'm still stuck using a very old version of React. I can use all the testing stuff that I want. I don't have to use their blank build toolchain. I can use all my testing stuff that I want. I just think it makes life so much easier that way, and not having to worry about, and it makes your solution so much more testable. Like SharePoint Framework stuff is so hard to test just because of, like, I never test anything with a SharePoint Framework because of this. But
yeah, because of the overhead
like this, and you separate the app and just using like the SharePoint Framework or Team stuff as the host for your app and the shim for loading it in that environment. And you use the techniques you're talking about using an NPM package to actually host the app. It's kind of nice to be able to have this, like, I can use this anywhere I want to use it now.
Yep. I don't always host them externally. Like it's actually fairly rare that I would host it externally, but definitely bundling it in happens a lot, because it's just easier where I can say, oh, okay, this package now, I've got it all working. I know everything's right. And I'm able to test it. I built my own like little test harness around it, and I can do whatever I need to do, and then bundle it into the solution at the end. The one thing I do want to just point out to people, and this was a little bit painful to figure out, the SharePoint Framework uses, or their external modules, when you point to an external module, they have to be AMD modules. So if you're, for instance, using Webpack, there's a way in Webpack where you say, oh, what kind of library do you want to build? And you give it a definition of what that library is. The way that I decided to finally solve that after painfully working with it many times is to use if I use Webpack, I'm not always using Webpack. I'm working on some other ways forward, but I often use universal module definition instead. So UMD libraries, what essentially that is all of them. It's all the module types. And I think it's better to do that because it gives me so many options for how I can then reuse that library, because it's all, it's common JS, it's AMD,
It's universal.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. It's universal. So that's an important one. It just makes it easier to build my test harness out. You don't have to worry so much about the tools. So I always bundle as UMD, and that way it makes it easier. The only other one gotcha is that if you are not specifically referencing React, the SharePoint framework doesn't actually make React available. So you do need to put require React and require React DOM, because you're not going to do the React DOM binding inside of the SharePoint framework. React is there. The import for React is there, but the import for React DOM isn't. So you have to do a require React DOM to get the SharePoint framework to put the dependency of React DOM in the manifest file that's in the dist folder.
Yeah,
if you know what I'm talking about.
The manifest
exactly.
component that tells the module loader what needs to be on the page.
So yeah, so that's the only other gotcha, and you just got to know about it. But other than that, pretty straightforward.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's a very good overview. I didn't have much to add at all in that. Very cool.
Well, this is something I present about publicly. So if you ever see it in my catalog of things I'm going to present when I'm out and about, you can come check it out.
Very cool. Very cool. Definitely gonna do that.
Awesome.
It's a good session.
Awesome. Well, that is all we have for this day today on this episode. So I think we can wrap it up. Did you have anything you wanted to add?
I want to add pics.
Oh, all right. Let's do those.
You're new to this, aren't you? No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, I am.
Julie, it's your show. What's your pick?
I'm going to go first. Okay, so my pick today is a chocolate chip cookie recipe. If you were on listen to our last episode, you know my pick is always going to revolve around cooking and food in some way, shape, or form. So I am picking a chocolate chip cookie recipe that is absolutely probably the best chocolate chip cookie I've ever eaten in my entire life. They are the big disc size ones that are like this big.
Oh, that's like a dinner plate on the link that you shared?
Oh yeah. It's giant cookie.
Hell yeah.
And it's got, you sprinkle flaked sea salt on top of it. So it's that sweet, savory. This recipe is by a woman named Erin French. And so her backstory is fantastic. He runs a kitchen up in Freedom, Maine. So Maine is where I'm from originally, actually. So Freedom, Maine is sort of towards the coast, about halfway between Booth Bay Harbor and Bar Harbor, so way up on the Maine coast. And she has part of, and actually at this point, I don't know if she owns the whole building, but she has an old mill is what her restaurants run in. And so it's the first floor of that is her restaurant. There is a series on the Discovery, HGTV Discovery Channel type of stuff, where it's like 3 seasons of her running this restaurant. And essentially what she did is she makes a lottery for getting a reservation to her restaurant. So the way she runs the lottery is on the first day of spring every year, she only runs the rest of the restaurant through the spring and summer when, there's produce and stuff coming in. She takes the winters off. You have to send in a postcard to her through the US mail, and she gets all the postcards together. And at this point, I think she gets something like 50, 60, 70,000 postcards. And it's a lottery system, and her and her team go through and they just randomly pick out postcards, and then they call you and tell you you've got a spot, and then they help you make a reservation. And then, they pick the next one until they get all the reservation spots filled up. And if somebody, goes out, they'll pick a new one and, backfill them. But essentially to get to this restaurant, it's pretty interesting. I've made a bunch of her recipes. They're fantastic. She's sort of the next generation of the Barefoot Contessa for anyone who's not familiar. It just wonderful, wonderful, wonderful stuff. And those chocolate chip cookies are amazing. So I highly recommend it.
That's awesome.
All right.
That looked awesome. That cookie looks really, really good.
It is delicious. Even my son. And then I was like, you can't have all these. Mom needs a few.
Yeah, right? Oh my gosh. Well, it's so good. Well, it makes 12. So, I mean, there you go. You have like one
Yeah.
for the husband, one for the kid, and 10 for you. It sounds
Yeah, exactly. Perfect.
And
Perfect.
9 for you. You're going to bring one to me when we go to Vegas,
Yes. All right. I'll make some and bring them to Vegas.
which we're going to Vegas for the Microsoft 365 conference. It's not you and I are going to Vegas. So let's not get
Right.
let's not rumor, right?
Right.
Okay. You and I are going to
Exactly.
Vegas with a couple thousand people. Okay. So it's like,
Yes,
just be clear about that.
exactly. Yes.
Okay. So mine is a Netflix series that I've been wanting to catch up on for a while. Finally caught up on it. Unfortunately, we blazed through it in 3 nights, including one night on the road. But
I hate when that happens.
Yeah, we tried what is it called, The Residence, where there was a murder at the White House, and it was good. But I like halfway through, I'm like, okay, this is very repetitive. I want to know what the ending was, but I feel like you've totally hooked me, and I have to stick around. And now I'm pissed that I'm stuck. So anyway, that wasn't very good. I'm also the only person in the world, it feels, that got 3 episodes into White Lotus, and I'm like, this sucks. I can't do this. These people piss me off.
I won't even start something like that. So
the one that I got into, the most recent season of Full Swing, so basically like the behind the scenes of the PGA Tour, it's really good. Really, just the storyline's really good. It's just like following them around and seeing like the behind the scenes stuff of it is really interesting. There was one part this time that I think my wife and I literally like yelled out loud at the same time at the TV, like, really, Netflix, you had to show that? And let's just say they go into the men's locker room and they're filming, and they're not even like censoring stuff. There's nothing really to see. There's no reason to censor stuff, right? So every once in a while there's like a guy walking around in his underwear, like, big deal, right?
Yep.
Or there's a guy that comes out of the shower and he's got a towel around him. Okay, again, big deal. You don't see anything. And then they just showed somebody, like, I'm just going to say they showed somebody drying themselves off. But there was no dialogue. And you're looking at it like going, I almost got the full Monty on Rory McIlroy. And I'm like, seriously? Like, we were both watching this like, really?
That seems unnecessary.
There was no value to this. I was like,
yeah.
Like, are you kidding me? But whatever. It's great. Season 3 is awesome. It ended with a little bit of a kind of slow, but they had a whole episode on like caddies and friendship between 2 guys, between Rory and Sean Lowry. It was good. It was very good. So you're a sports guy, sports person, it's good.
My dad might like that. I'll have to pass it along.
It's very good.
Cool.
Yeah. Awesome.
Well, I think that wraps up this show. So on to the next one.
Here we
Thanks
go.
everybody for joining us.
See everybody next time.
Did you like this episode? Please like and share it with your friends. We are on YouTube, Blue Sky, and LinkedIn. All the links are in the video description. If you have a question, head to codedeploygo.live where you can send it in. Also, sign up for our mailing list on our site at codedeploygo.live to learn about future episodes, opportunities for listeners, and get the show notes from each episode sent straight to your inbox. We'll be back with another episode in 2 weeks.